go.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's roundtable discussion here on mycountylink.com as we continue to take a look at interesting people, places, and events, and just all around the occurrences here in not only Darke County, but West Central Ohio. Alex Warner, along with Mike Stegall, Gaylen Blosser, and our special guest today, John Coffey. I'm going to talk quite a bit about John's background, dealing with high school girls basketball, AAU basketball, things of that nature. And welcome, John. Glad to have you here today.
Well, first of all, let me say I'm thankful and grateful to be here. And every day I'm thankful, getting up. But I've also felt like the longer I've been into coaching, which is 43 years, and I go to the grocery store and people say, "Are you still coaching?" So I think I'll get something here. But I've found that, I try to do people right. And the longer I've coached, naturally more people come into your life.
Yeah, all right.
And some of them you could do without, and others it's a blessing. The man to my right, I don't know how we hooked up, but I see a guy with a camera, and I know he's not there to take pictures of me.
That's understandable.
Yeah, no, you know what I mean. I can go along with that.
Wow, welcome, John.
Welcome to the show.
Well, okay. Well, I can see right now that I better sharpen my
Yeah, you got to
tools.
pick your game up here.
But anyway, I've been blessed to meet a lot of really good people, and basically you talk about a circle of friends, and now I'm at a round table. I hope that I'll be able to add you two to my circle. And so I'll try to be on my best today. So
well, we're glad to have you. And it's interesting. You say people come up to you and ask if you're still coaching.
Right.
They come up to Gaylen and me, and maybe once in a while Mike go, "You guys still living?"
Yeah.
God.
You guys
Oh,
still
well.
living? Hey, Gaylen, why don't you introduce a little bit about John here, because you've got some real good background with this man.
Wow.
Well, I learned to know John. I just met him at ball games, and for a year or two I would watch him, and here's this tall guy down along the court at all the girls' games, and so we talked one day, and I found out he's a United States Army veteran, which is kind of cool with me. And I thank you for your service, John.
Same to you.
So over time, I got to know him. So now when I go to games, like last night I was at Arcanum, a JV game. He and I sit there the whole JV game. And I've learned a lot about the game of basketball from John. He probably doesn't realize how much I've picked up from him, but I have learned a lot. He has coached some of the major lady players in the country. He can let you know those. He coached the 3 Downing girls from Tri-Village. One's now playing Division I ball, one's playing Division II. He's introduced me to a lot of people. I met the new coach at Newton. She played for UD 4 years, and I interviewed her after a game this year and was asking her about John, and she said playing for John was the best thing she ever did.
Oh my
So
God, that cost a lot of money that night.
Yeah.
I mean, oh gosh.
So he's just a great guy. He's very quiet. But I've learned a lot from him, and thank you, John, for that. He's just a good friend.
Well, let's talk just a little bit about your background. You were telling me you graduated from Jefferson Township High School back whenever.
Back in the day, and basically, we were a small school, and we had a coach come in and out of Kentucky, and he was kind of like Columbus Hines. I mean, he was, and they both sort of played like, this will date you, Adolph Rupp. That style of ball. I mean, so it was like, and I had a brother. My brother was like 6'8", and he played a couple years, 2 or 3 years older than I. But then they had a guy named Al Chucker. His dad was a Harlem Globetrotter, so they were really good. And I would sit in the gym and watch those guys play, and I knew I wasn't going to be 6'8" or 6'10", and I don't know, half of that team or more could dunk the basketball. And back then, that was a big thing. So I kept trying to learn how to dunk, and get a softball or something. Oh God, I'm there. You know what I mean? I finally learned how, but I wasn't willing to do it in a game because I would have missed the shot, you know, and I'd probably been taken out. But, you know, back then it was like a thing where we were a small country school, and the team that you talk about bonding and chemistry, it means so much in sports, and we were really, really tight. And Dixie was like a powerhouse. I think they had won the state.
With Columbus Hines.
With Columbus Hines. I mean, he was phenomenal. And I remember a time, you know, that Columbus came to our gym, and we had a thing called it was like something you get in to help loosen muscles up or something like that. And Columbus came to ours with a player, and I thought, well, he's just spying on us, you know what I mean? That's a smart move, though. And I thought, my God, he's seeing everything we do. But him and Coach Day were really good friends. And so I learned something from there, like, because if I was coaching against you and you were, you know, you were my rival, that instead of hating you or wanting to beat the hell out of you, so to speak, pardon my French there, I would just be friends, and then, you know, may the best man win on that day. But no, I came from a small school, and we ended up being a pretty good basketball team. Right. You know, back then there was only a couple classes, Class A, Double A.
Right.
And I know you guys were officials, so you kind of realize what that is. But I can remember in a tournament sitting on the bench with 30 seconds to go, and we were playing Roosevelt, and I did not want to go in. I mean, we were, and the coach put me in, and the first play that I had the ball, I think, man, I'm going down for a basket, and the guy came up from behind me and pushed me. Instead of me just falling, I tried to keep myself up, and I tore a muscle.
That's usually not good.
And that is not good. And then there was a couple, I mean, and back then, you know, of course it was an intentional foul. And I was, you know, after they picked me up off the floor, the guy said, I got to come out of the game. He said, well, you got to shoot the free throws. I thought, oh my God, you know what I mean? If I miss these free throws, I'm not going to get taken out of the game. So I said a prayer, let me hit 2 free throws. I went out. And then my dad and my sister, they took me to the hospital that night. And, you know, back then, there was no trainers, there was nothing.
Yep.
And it's a shame. And then I remember getting some news that the guy, my doctor said, if you really want to play basketball, you'll never be a player. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you can sell tickets. You tore a muscle. And you know, so what I did, I didn't accept that. And I did some training on my own. I mean, like running in my yard, jumping rope. But anyway, I became a player, you know, and so I kind of, sometimes adversity, you know, you tell players, and I don't know today that they know how to handle it. But it's the truth. And we all have adversity, you know. So.
It's a great teacher. Adversity is a great teacher.
It is. It's one of the best, and you know, and with some of the players today, pulling a player out and setting them on the bench, that's a good teacher too.
Yeah, that's a real good.
I mean, you get their attention, you know.
Yeah, all right. Well, so you graduated from Jefferson,
Right?
And then Gaylen has talked a little bit about you went ahead into the service, and I remember reading some background stuff. Gold Star recipient.
Well, yeah, you know, yeah.
Did I read that correctly?
Yeah, that's right.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Was this through NOM, I assume?
Yeah, but you know, story on that is like, you know, they always say don't volunteer, and you know, and I took that serious. But when we went to, after I got out of basic training at Fort Knox, you know, and do a lot of marching down there, the hills and misery. That, you know, is a place that we had to do our basic training. And I can remember once when we went to go into this training park, we set our helmets down here and you know, went in and got our shots. I mean, when you went to a shot line, it was like, and when we came out, we couldn't even find our helmets. It was so much snow. And I looked over here and seen 2 piles of snow, and I thought, I'm gonna take a picture of that, don't melt, and say, I don't want that, keep it Greenville, you know what I mean? So, but I had an opportunity to go to college, but I got, now the word drafted, I don't even know if it exists, but I got drafted into the service for 2 years, and I say to this day, it's the best thing, one of the best things that's ever happened to me. I mean, discipline and, you know, and then again to support my country. And I go to a lot of games, and I always take a picture of the flag. I mean, you know, I don't know how many pictures I got in here, but I always say it's an honor to stand and you know, support our great American flag.
So anyhow, so you get out of the service
Right.
and then kind of stayed down around that area out west of Dayton there. Then
Right,
you
right.
Came back there, and then you said you worked millwright and for different companies and so forth.
Yeah, well, I started out, you know, my dad was, you know, he was a millwright, and most people say they don't even know what that is, but it's the guys, people that set machinery and stuff like that. And we worked out of a union hall, and a lot of times work was not steady. And so, you know, I remember him telling me that if you go to one company and stay there, retirement. Well, when you're young, you don't think of the word. I mean, what is retirement?
Yeah.
So I took his advice, and you know, I went in on a Wednesday, and the place was Frigidaire then. And I said to myself, if I don't like this, I won't be back Monday. But it was like, it was a different world. I mean, the work was so easy for me, and the other guys were complaining about, God, this is hard work, and it was nothing to me.
Piece of cake.
I mean, it was a piece of cake, and so, like you say, I enjoyed the cake, and so I spent 36 years there.
Okay.
Wow.
So let's talk now. One of the main reasons we have John here today is because of his involvement with athletics, high school athletics, and American amateur athletic,
Right.
AAU basketball, and on the girls' side. How
Right.
did this all come about? Because Mike's always got a lot of thoughts on youth football, and,
Yeah.
high school football, things of that nature. How did you end up on the girls' side of things?
Well, I'll tell you, it's like this. I've always had a love to be in the gym. And of course, I would watch my brother play, you know, and then I also learned that, you know, sometimes whenever I was there, the coach would call me down, I get to sit and play a dummy defense, and I was good at dummy defense. and so I got a little bit of experience there. But my nephews, you know, one of them was out in New York, and he tore his knee up, so he didn't, you know, unfortunately, he didn't get the care he needed out there. And then Wes Coffey, the people that know him,
Right.
I started taking him to a lot of basketball camps. And I remember...
He played at Dixie, correct?
He played at Dixie.
Right.
And back then there was a guy at Dixie, I mean not at Dixie, but Don Donaher was recruiting a guy named Phil Taylor. Not Phil Taylor, his last name was Taylor, I forget the first name. And he ended up going somewhere to Michigan or something like that. And so whenever I met Don Donaher, of course I was nervous. I mean, you know, he's an icon. I listened to him a lot. And, you know, he said, tell me about Wes. And you know, I mean, just like Gaylen likes to tell him about John Coffey, you're not going to go there and try to sell him. If you're a used car salesman, he's going to see right through you. So I said, I told him he's a hard worker, and I said, I work with him, and he loves the game. And you know, he's 6'10" then, but he needs to put on some weight. And you know, so I would take him to Dominic's, and he would get 2 meals.
Good spot.
It was a great spot, and the salad with the, I mean, it was
that garlic
dressing.
The garlic
garlic.
dressing.
I would say, you eat this and breathe on a player, they'll stay away from me. You know what I mean? But anyway, he wasn't gaining an ounce, but I was gaining some weight, you know. But anyway, and so then I said, well, you know, I'm out there at Dixie. There's a guy that I think is as good as Taylor. And Donner said, what? I said, yeah, you know, and because if I see something, you know, I'm not afraid to give my opinion. And so I said, he said, what's his name? I said, Kenny Branch. And so he said, well, okay, we're needing a player. So he said, I don't know if you guys remember Bucky Bockhorn.
Oh, yeah.
Sure. He said, can you arrange a scrimmage? Well, I wasn't, you know, had that kind of connection, so I put myself on the spot, and I asked Gary Peffley, I said, hey, look, they're you know, Don Donaher and Bucky Bockhorn would like to see Kenny Branch play. Can you get a scrimmage together? And so, you know, I remember them coming all the way out to Dixie, and watching, and then after that, they talked to Kenny and gave him a scholarship. So, you know, I was really happy about I could make a difference in that kid's life. And he did not disappoint. He was a good athlete down there, and you know, and he was a black guy, and Wes was a, you know, a white guy, and they became really good friends. So, you know, so color in sports, there's no reason, you know, there's nothing, you know, especially in football, you put the helmet on, you don't even see the face.
I think you're right about that, John. I think in almost all sports, they're colorblind.
They're
If you can play,
colorblind.
you play, you can't. It's just that simple.
You can't hide yourself out there. I mean, I watch a game and you know, I just love the game. But to get back to how I got into the girls' side, after I trained Wes a little bit, you know, when I say I trained, all I did was pass him the ball. How you going to train a post player, you know, when I wasn't a post player, I was a forward. So I throw the ball in, but I remember one time we took him to a camp in Michigan, and you had to be a certain height just to get in. I think you had to be 6'8" or bigger to get into the thing, and it's kind of funny. I look back at some. I mean, it's crazy that you remember the funny things. They were measuring everybody that came in the thing.
Kind of like getting on a ride at an amusement
Well,
park. or
guess
something like
what?
that.
The guy was a little short guy with a tape, and he was standing in a chair. And I said, I hope he don't fall off. So, you know, God, I'd say there's about 200. And I was always used to seeing Wes stand out in a crowd. So my brother and I, we went and got a little lunch and came back, and all these guys were walking to go to a gym, and they split them up. We couldn't pick Wes out because he was just a normal
He
size.
just fit in.
I mean, you know. But anyway, you know, and then they practice real late and stuff. So I tried to learn. Well, I tried to learn as much as I can about basketball. And
Now, did you coach at the high school level down at, was it Dixie or Carlisle?
Yeah, well, you know, now, thanks for keeping me on the track of the basketball. So I had a niece that she was 6'3", and then she listened to this. She's one of the laziest players that I've ever seen. But I would set, you know, if I would push her, she was pretty good. And so she was Wes's sister. And so I started, you know, again, I go somewhere and I was sitting in the gym, and one day you know, the head coach, I thought he came up to me and he said, I thought he was going to say, hey, we don't allow people in here. And I would have respected it, but he said, I know that you are into basketball, and I know what you helped with Wes. He said, you think you can do anything with this? Because she was a project. And I said, well, what do you mean? I said, what would you like? He said, well, she seems to play better when you're there. And I didn't know what he was getting at. And so he said, okay, how about you sitting on the bench? And I said, well, I could do that. That's a good seat. And to this day, when I go to a game, you will see me in the front row. You came up last night, and I was sitting on the front row. And some people say you can't see as much from there, but anyway, I started coaching her. And again, like I say, she was pretty lazy, and she was coming.
She around where she's going to be able to hear this show? Is she?
Well, she's over in Indiana. Maybe we won't broadcast this over there. But you know, and to this day, though, she's very successful over there in business now, because I think it was the push and the drive to, you know, in basketball, which I think, you know, if you do something that you love and a passion, you're going to do well at.
Yeah. Well, when did this all start? Because I know we've talked in the past, you know, you look back, and I know for a long time there were no girls interscholastic sports.
no.
Yeah.
You know, it seemed like something happened in the early 30s, because I know, and going back through old yearbooks,
Yes.
Greenville's girls were almost self-proclaimed state champions back around 1926, 27.
Oh, wow.
And then through about the early 30s, and all of a sudden, there were no girls interscholastic sports, at least around this area. And I know it was the early 70s before they picked that up again. So it went about 40 years. And I don't know, that was about
my time, yeah.
Yeah, about the time you got out of high school.
Yeah.
But it just seemed like all of a sudden it started picking up, and the tremendous progress in girls' athletic programs over the last 50 years. I mean, it's just been unbelievable.
Oh, it's growing, and you know they're getting their dues, so to speak, because if you go to a girls' game, they work really hard, and the guys get all the attention, you know, and the crowds are a little smaller, but girls like, you know, that they work with a purpose, they want to get better, and you know, speaking of Greenville, you know, I got into, I was coaching high school ball, but I thought, well, and then so I went to a practice of AAU, and a guy that I work with, he had a daughter. God, I said, she's pretty good. She's only like, I think it's like the 6th or 7th grade. And I said, God, she's really good. And he said, yeah, I push her. I'm her coach. And he said, I'm basically wanting, you know, it's time for Dad to cut the cord. And I thought, well, you know, what's this guy going to tell me? You know, and so he said, are you interested in coaching? Well, I mean, I sat on the bench. I don't know if I'm interested because I haven't done it. But anyway, I got hooked right there, and I started, you know, coaching her, and I went to a lot of clinics. I tried to soak Bobby Knight. I went to his, Pat Summit, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to learn as much as I could, as fast as I could. So I started coaching, you know, back then, high school and AAU, and so that takes a lot of time.
AAU's mainly summer.
Yeah, it's mainly summer, starts in March, you know, and then goes up to August. But at Dixie High School, you know, I say this and people will say, hey, there's something wrong with me. Well, there might be, but I never wanted to be the head coach. And so I was a JV coach, and I was happy with that. You know, it wasn't like you see some guys, they're sitting here, if there's the JV coach, they want his job, they're not going to help him, you know. But I never was that way. And we actually went through 5 different coaches, and every time, you know, I got along pretty good with the parents and the players. Every time the job came up, they said, you going to take that job? And I'd say, no, I'm happy where I'm at. So for 14 years, I was a JV coach.
Mm-hmm.
And what I learned from that is, you know, I went to football games and tried to get these kids to help sell the program. And then I said, hey, let's have some managers, because that's going to be youth. And so we had 5 managers, and those 5 managers could have beat my team, or, you know, we'd have a drill and they would just put everybody down. So
These are boys as managers.
No, they're girls.
These are your girl managers?
Yeah. That's how bad my JV teams were.
Okay.
So, but, you know, so I had some kids, but I know that I never wanted a kid to quit the program.
Mm-hmm.
So, but, you know, I didn't cater down to that, but, you know, you get a kid that can't pass, dribble, or shoot,
Mm-hmm.
You're in trouble. So I worked extra hard, but I had 2 rules back then, and I live by those today. And number 1 is work hard and have fun. If you put those 2 together, you get a pretty good combination.
John, it seems to me like you said something that kind of got me. You never wanted to be the head coach. You always wanted to be the JV.
Right.
Did you just want to stay JV because you felt like you could actually teach them the game? You didn't have to worry about all the other stuff?
Yeah, I mean, you know, and I don't even want to use the word. I think back then it wasn't there, politics and stuff like that. If you was the varsity coach,
just
you
wanted
had,
to teach.
you had to deal with, you know, parents and stuff. But I learned how to deal with parents on my AAU team, but I go out and select.
Mm-hmm.
When I recruit a player, I'm also recruiting parents. And so if I pick a bad one, I have to deal with them.
You've obviously coached quite a bit in a long time.
Yes.
What do you consider, what is your coaching philosophy? What's your core beliefs when coaching?
You mean style of play?
Whatever.
Okay.
What do you believe in most in coaching? What's your philosophy?
Well, first of all, I believe in relationships, that every player on the team, I want to make them feel special. You know what I mean? Because they get so many times after a game, the uncle come up or the grandma of all things and say, God, you had a terrible game. I mean, you know,
Yeah,
you can't have that. I mean, you're going to have some bad games, but I try to be positive. You know, I went to a camp one time down in West Virginia. A good friend of mine, he's a guru and trainer, And I was there, and he put me on the spot, like, hey, I want you to speak to this group. Well, God, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so once I got wound up, I put out a pretty good message. And so Mom came up to me and said, hey, are you on Twitter? I said, what is Twitter? So she signed me up, and so that can be a good tool if you use it right. But my philosophy is, you know, you play the cards you're dealt. If you've got a team that you got to adjust to them, your players that can play fast, you play fast. If you got a team that has to walk the ball up,
Boy.
you walk the ball up. But I want to play fast, and you know, and I tell kids, if we make a turnover going 100 miles an hour, and it was the right way, then you know we're going to get better at it. So playing fast, I think it puts pressure on the other team. So I would say that. And one of the things that I picked up whenever I actually had a player go to UConn, and you probably know who the coach
Tamika
is
Williams.
there. Yeah, Tamika Williams, and now she's the head coach at UD.
Mm-hmm.
So she played for me at a very young age, and you know when I got her team, we actually practiced at Jefferson, and you know one time the ball went out of bounds. We were practicing, and they all went to the line, and they got down in a hurdle stand. I said, what are you guys doing? He said, well, Coach, we're going to do a suicide. I said, not on my watch. You know,
Yeah.
because I don't believe in all the years that I've coached, and I know you guys know what a suicide is.
Mhm.
Boom, boom, boom. Now, do you ever see that play in basketball?
Never.
Never. And the word suicide itself, I mean, come on now. So anyway, I mean, no, I know I'm getting off track, but a little bit like that. But my philosophy is to believe in what you're doing and try to transform that to your players that love the game and have a passion, and you know, and be coachable. Be a good teammate.
In all the years that you coached, I mean, if you'd ask any official, coach, whatever, there's one player that was your all-time favorite, and doesn't have to be necessarily your best player,
Yeah.
but there was one person
Wow.
that stuck out to you more than anybody else. Who would that be?
Well, I'd have to call two of them, you know what I mean?
Okay.
If that's okay, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? And
I
one
don't
of
know
them,
what to think about that.
well, okay, hey, time out, okay, full time out. But anyway, I get that question a lot because, you know, and, but I would have to say Tamika Williams and Allison Bales
Okay.
From Beaver Creek.
from Beaver Creek. There was a kid that was, you know, pretty tall, and so I remember the night that I met Allison. She was actually a JV player, and after the game, she had a bag of candy, and she's a little plump. I mean, Allison, no offense, I have to tell what you were. And so, and then her dad knew of the success that I was having, Charles Bales, and he wanted her to play for somebody that, you know, that could maybe help her. So I had that going for me. And so I took Allison, and you know, those two right there. I mean, I loved every player that I've ever had. You know, some of them I say, oh my God, why did I?
Mhm.
But you know, and let me give some kudos out here to Greenville, because there was a kid named Amy Enos.
Mm.
Maybe before, you know, I don't know
Yeah,
if you guys are
Amy
aware.
Enos graduated in the early 90s.
She was really a good player. And then there's another player, Brittany Runner.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so those are two pretty good ones. You go in the gym and you look at all the records, they're holding them. And then one more was Macy Bland.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, amazing.
So, I mean, you know, right here in this small town, or a lot of school that I go into, I can say I was blessed to have the best player that's ever played.
How wide an area do you recruit? Because you're based out of the Dayton area. So how wide an area? You bring kids in from Columbus or Cincinnati or what?
You know, back then, and I say back in the day, and I know you guys can appreciate that, things have changed. I don't have the caliber of players that I had then. But I can tell you, and I tell people, I never BS, and that's bull whatever, about basketball. Because I think once you start doing it, it becomes easy to do. But I had a team, and people will question that, but all you gotta do is ask one of the players that's on the team. I had a team that I had 16 players on.
Gee.
Now you say, you know, like now, I mean, I cut it down to 10 because people say, how can you make 16 players happy? Well, guess what? These kids came from all over the state.
Mm-hmm.
And they were McDonald All-Americans, and one of them, I think, was Miss Ohio basketball. What I found was, when you get a group like that, they were happy for each other. And you know, and so they didn't care about how much time. Nowadays, I don't know if it's the parents or the whatever, they think they have to play the whole game.
Mm-hmm.
But this team was just happy, and I mean, I don't think we lost a game, and back then we played all over the place. Every single kid there got a scholarship.
How do you set up your travels and set up your schedule?
Well, that's you know, like I say, I got
Because we're going to have to wrap this up in about 5-10 minutes.
Oh,
here.
okay, well, yeah, I
Oh,
mean, I
gosh.
appreciate it. Well, what I do is like, you know, I take in consideration the travel. Of course, I could go anywhere, you know, but that's me, and I got to take in consideration now that parents can hardly afford
Yes.
that. So I go, but I have learned over the time, I have made pretty good contacts with the promoters of these games. And so they give me, and I call this a coffee discount. You know, I mean, like, you know, somebody gives me something, if I
That and $1 gets you a cup of coffee. Is that
that may be, but and jokingly, that stuck with me. And when I go to these things, they you know, give me a pass, and I get in and I get the hospitality room. I say that's a coffee discount. But
okay.
I like now when I recruit, I tell players this ain't for everybody, and then I take a schedule, and you know, I don't get them all. But the thing is, because I know that parents and stuff like this, the COVID year, believe it or not, we played more than any year that I played. We was in Indiana for every weekend because you couldn't play in Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I had a really good, again, the better the team, they're willing to go farther
Mm-hmm.
because they know that
That competition.
they're knocking the competition and they're knocking on the door, hey, I'm gonna get a scholarship.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the kids now, I look at them and say, she's probably not gonna get a scholarship, but she loves the game, she can make her high school team better. So I gotta say, hey, look, I wanna help them. So
I gotta ask you one
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Advice to parents that have student athletes playing ball. What advice do you give parents?
Well, first of all, you know, number one, be a good parent because most of them are. But I would say leave the coaching to the coaches. So many times your good players, you'll see them when they miss a shot or make a turnover, they're looking at dad or mom, and sometimes I've sat beside some dads. They're telling after a timeout, a coach is drawing something up. You know that, and so they come out, and the first thing they do if they're on this side of the court, the parent, Dad,
They
and
look
they
at
say,
the parent.
shoot the ball. Well, guess what? You just shot a terrible shot. You know what I mean? And so I tell my team now that I ask my team, how many of you like to make a turnover? Well, nobody raises their hand. And I say, how many of you like to take a bad shot? Well, or has taken a bad shot. And you know, so I say a bad shot is a turnover. And I heard that in Gino's practice, and that stuck with me. So don't take a shot you know you can't make, because
Yeah.
it's not a time to go out there and practice your shot. But with parents, like, be a parent, and your best thing that you can do after that kid comes off, especially with tears in their eyes, be supportive. And you know, the thing about travel ball, I tell people that, you know, coming to practice, this and that, you really get to know your kid because you've got them in the car. But be supportive, and I think they see how I treat their kids, and I don't say, hey, treat your kid like I treat them, no, because you're the parent. But your role, the refs have a role, I have a role, the player has a role, and the parent has a big role.
Mhm.
So you know, that's kind of what I would say. And you've seen me, you've told me about players, and I'll say, well, how's the parent? And I'll go and meet them. And so I appreciate that, because I found out now it's not worth it for me to I mean, I can take a little bit of stuff, but I don't wanna have to turn on a picture and say, God, you know what I mean? But
Yeah, I know what you mean.
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly.
You know that, right?
Yep.
Are most of the kids you contact then recommended by somebody like Gaylen that sees a lot of ball that way, or do parents directly contact you? Or how does some parent out there that has a kid they think, and I know every parent thinks their kid has
yeah.
talent, but how would they get involved in AAU? Because I know there's different levels. There's travel
Right,
AAU.
right.
You know, there's a wide variety of AAU, you know, talents and potentials out there.
Well, you know, here's something that, like, I reflected back on, and you know, if it sounds like I'm jumping all over the place for that 43 years, you know, you've been all over the places. But once I got on Twitter, and I said I'll never post anything negative, and you follow me a little bit, thank you. And so there was a kid and her dad, they came up to me, and this girl was in, I know you all seen the boot that they wear. This kid comes up to me and said, hey, Coach Coffey, I follow you on Twitter. I said, well, thank you. And she said, I'd like to maybe play for you. Well, this kid's in a boot, looked unathletic to start with, and this and that. And so she said, and then when she got out of the boot, she was having trouble with the coach. And so I thought, well, is it you or is it the coach? And I should never say this, but I watched and I thought it's the coach. Here was a kid that was going to give up on basketball. And so I had a spot or two left, and so and I carried an extra backpack with, you know, the brand on it, and I said, well, would you like to have this backpack? And she said, I said, well, how would you like to play for me? I thought the kid, she burst out in tears. And now she's playing, you know, and she came all the way from Columbus to practice. And now she moved to Ludenville, of all things, and she's got a D2 scholarship. And she gives me a little bit of credit, which I don't do this for credit, but she thanked me, the mom and dad, you know, thanked me for kind of helping them save their kid. I mean, you know, the more support that you give a kid, the better it is. So through Twitter, that's how that player. But I go, I was on the phone with Jim DeBell out there, and you know, he's a pretty good guy about keeping me straight, maybe where I'm going to go. I said, are there any games tonight? Well, no, but there's a big one coming up, the Versailles thing. Well, I'll be there. Okay, so basically, I'll go and I'll watch, and then I think I do it the right way. I'll approach the high school coach, and then I'll approach the parents and say, is your daughter interested? I don't go directly to a player because I don't think that's the right way. I see other coaches doing it, but that's not my style. And so I don't put pressure. They say they want to think about it. I know a lot of coaches say, hey, look, I've only have one spot left. I need an answer right now. I give them time because it's a decision. And you know, you're going to be on the road a lot. You're going to be this and that. And they say, a parent will say, well, what can you do for my kid? And that's where I don't hesitate. I say, I believe.
Time's up.
Yeah.
Time's up. I believe I can help make you a better basketball player. That's the only thing I can promise you.
Yep.
And they say, well, can you get her, when they say, can you get her a scholarship? I say, nobody can. But, you know, I can make her a better player. And I say, even if I'm not a very good coach, she will get better because of the competition we're going to play against. So if you play with, you know, against better people, get your butt kicked, then you become a better basketball player.
Well, you know, we could go on for hours here.
Well,
and it's been interesting that your background and then how you've gotten involved in this. And I think it's one of those things where, you know, you get involved in something like that, and it's the reward you get is the kids, like the girl that went to Ludenville.
Yeah, right.
And said, you know, the parents say, hey, you know, you saved our daughter. And I think that's the reward you get. It's good there's people.
That's the
I
biggest
also think,
reward.
John, will also tell you that dealing with these kids and stuff, that keeps you young, doesn't it, John?
Well, it does.
Yeah.
You know, it may turn the hair gray and make you lose some, but you know, I say, okay, that's a sacrifice. I think of the alternative of, you know, because I just had a birthday, and you know, my birthday January 2nd, so you go through Christmas and you go through New Year's, and then the big day's January 2nd, my birthday. No, but the people, you know, they send you birthday wishes and stuff like that. So that kind of helps.
It's the relationships you've built over the years.
It is, and you know, like I've got some pictures of national championship trophies. I'm gonna keep those, but I've gotten rid of a lot of trophies, but I'm more proud of helping kids now than I am winning a national championship.
You
One
do have
last question. Go ahead.
you do have 6 championships, right?
National,
National.
and
That's
came in
what I was
second
gonna
twice, came in twice. You've seen the picture.
Yeah.
At what, 16U?
Well, no,
or
7, the
18U?
highest level that you
Okay.
could play, and back then, I mean, AAU was the only thing going. Now they have exposure events, and so it's a little bit different story. But you know, I coached against some teams that had college coaches for their, you know, JUCO college players. And one time we coached a team that they were a JUCO team, and I said, God, look at these kids, like, you know. And we go in, and we were in Texas, and my brother, you know, kind of quiet mannered, and I said, well, Jim, how about you sitting on my bench? And he said, yeah. And so this girl busted one of my players in the mouth and started bleeding. And my brother just yelled out, welcome to Texas. They teed him up, tossed him out of the game. I said, God, Jim. I said, Jim, you're my brother. You can't say anything
Welcome to Texas.
like that. So welcome to Texas. But we actually won a national championship in Texas,
Okay.
in Oklahoma, Louisiana. So those are things when you really traveled a lot. And again, you know, you know, today it's changed, and you've got to change rather than stick in the mud and say, it's been this way, it's gonna be that way, or you lose. But, you know, again, I do it, you know, it's one thing, I guess when you make a little Twitter thing, I didn't realize you're supposed to put something on there about who you are. And so I met a guy named Wade O'Connor, and you know, he's a real good trainer, one of the best. And he said, well, what's your purpose? I said, I don't know. Well, you know what I mean? He said, well, you need to know what your purpose is. So I put down my purpose was to coach girls basketball. And so I'm living that purpose.
Okay.
But, you know, and this is a guy that can teach the shot. I was at a camp with him, and Jerron Holmes, the guy at UD, there's a bunch of little kids. Jerron went to the foul line. First one he banked off the back, next one he airballed. And then finally he asked Wade, you know, hey, can you help me? You gotta ask somebody if you know, and so now he's shooting about 80% and shooting threes.
Yeah.
So there it was, I think, having people to feel comfortable with asking you, how can I help you? And so that's one of the things that Wade O'Connor, how may I serve you? And you know, and how can I help you? And this guy, he takes, I mean, it's like I can get to know a player just by his pictures.
He's got an arthritic finger too.
Yeah, and it was so ironic last night, some lady, and he's very cordial, as I watch him, he goes up and he's talking to the referees, and I took a picture and I said, put it on Twitter, said, hey, he's giving them a pep talk, right? And so he took it in a good way. And then also there was a lady in the stand sitting behind me, she seen that camera, and she asked you, how much does that thing weigh? And so, I mean, I know it's pretty expensive. He handed it to her, she said, oh my God, it's heavy. And so it is heavy, so he's carrying a heavy load, and you know, if we wanna help people, sometimes we all gotta be willing to carry that heavy load.
Yep.
Yeah, well, hey, I tell you, that's good advice to end the program with. Thanks so much
Thanks,
for
John,
stopping
for
by. John Coffey,
Thanks, John.
Mr.
Thanks for
AAU
coming.
basketball,
Oh, wow.
and it's just
Thank you, sir.
so the philosophy was just as good as the stories, which were many. So, anyhow, thanks so much for stopping by. And I know you're going to be busy watching ball this weekend too, I assume. So, hey, on behalf of Gaylen Blosser down here, Mike Stegall, Alex Warner, thanks for joining us here on the round table as we continue to take a look at different things and events that go on around. And thanks again, John Coffey, down west of Dayton there. We'll see you next time here on the round table.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.